Here's a question that breaks most people's brains. If every country on Earth is drowning in debt, who exactly are they in debt to? The United States owes over $38 trillion. The European Union collectively owes around $14 trillion. Japan carries nearly $9 trillion in government debt. China, despite being portrayed as a creditor nation, has massive domestic debt. In fact, if you add up all government debt worldwide, it exceeds $100 trillion. So here's the paradox. If everyone owes money, and the debt keeps growing, who's actually holding all this debt? Are we in debt to aliens? To some shadowy global elite? The answer reveals how the modern economic system actually works. And it's far more disturbing than simple conspiracies about bankers. Because the truth is that debt itself has become the foundation of the global economy. And the real power lies with whoever controls the credibility of that debt. The Sabio Observer recognizes that this paradox exposes the fundamental illusion underlying modern finance. National debt isn't like household debt, where you borrow from someone who has money and eventually pay it back. Government debt is a perpetual instrument that's never meant to be repaid, only rolled over forever. It's held by institutions, banks, pension funds, insurance companies, central banks, and foreign governments who need government bonds not because they want repayment, but because they need a safe asset to back their own operations. In the debt system, government bonds have become the ultimate form of money itself, more important than currency, because they pay interest and can be used as collateral for creating even more money through the banking system. National debt isn't a burden to be eliminated, it's the asset that holds the entire financial elite structure together, and understanding who actually holds this debt reveals the real distribution of power in the global economy. It's not foreign countries controlling America through debt holdings. It's domestic financial institutions that own 2/3 of U.S. government debt, meaning American banks, pension funds, and the Federal Reserve itself. Foreign holders like China and Japan own only about 1/3, and even they hold it not for control, but because they need dollar-denominated safe assets for their own reserves. The debt crisis narrative you hear that nations are bankrupting themselves, or that China owns America, is deliberately misleading propaganda. The real story is that government debt is the mechanism through which the banking system creates money, concentrates power, and extracts wealth from populations through taxation that services perpetual interest payments. Stick with me, and I'll expose who actually holds national debt, why the system is designed never to repay it, and what this reveals about who really controls the modern economy. Ready to solve the debt paradox? Let's follow the money to its source. Let's start by confronting the paradox head-on. Every nation is in debt, yet this debt must be held by someone as an asset. The confusion comes from thinking of government debt like personal debt. You borrow $10,000 from a bank. They have that money. You pay it back. Transaction complete. But government debt works completely differently because governments issue bonds, which are financial instruments that become assets for whoever purchases them. When the U.S. Treasury issues a $1 million bond, that bond becomes an asset on someone's balance sheet, a pension fund, an insurance company, a foreign central bank. The debt is both a liability for the government that owes it and an asset for the institution that holds it simultaneously. This is the key insight. In modern finance, one entity's debt is always another entity's asset. So who are these holders turning government debt into assets? In the United States, about 70% of marketable treasury debt is held by domestic entities. The biggest single holder is actually the Federal Reserve itself. America's central bank owns over $5 trillion in U.S. government bonds. This is crucial to understand. The U.S. government owes money to itself through its own central bank, which created money from nothing to buy those bonds in the first place, through quantitative easing and other monetary policy operations. Then come commercial banks, which hold massive quantities of government bonds, both as safe assets to satisfy capital requirements and as collateral to create more loans. Pension funds and insurance companies hold trillions more because they need long-term safe assets to match their long-term liabilities. And mutual funds, including money market funds that regular people invest in, hold government debt because it's considered the safest investment possible. The remaining 30% or so is held by foreign entities. And this is where the propaganda gets thick. Yes, Japan holds about $1.1 trillion in U.S. treasuries, and China holds roughly $850 billion. But these aren't tools of geopolitical control, they're necessary reserves. When Japan runs trade surpluses with the U.S., earning dollars, They need to store those dollars somewhere safe and interest-bearing, so they buy treasury bonds. It's not control. It's parking money. And even if China or Japan suddenly sold all their treasury holdings, domestic institutions would absorb them, because the demand for safe assets far exceeds supply. The real power isn't in foreign holdings that get headlines. It's in the domestic banking system and central banks that create the money to buy government debt, making them both creditor and monetary authority simultaneously. This concentration of power in the financial elite, who control both government debt and money creation, is the actual structure of the modern economy. But understanding why this debt is never meant to be repaid reveals the truly predatory nature of the system. Now let's expose the most important truth about government debt that politicians and economists deliberately obscure. The system is designed so that this debt is never repaid, only rolled over forever. When a government bond matures, say a 10-year treasury bond issued in 2015 comes due in 2025, the government doesn't pay it off by collecting extra taxes or selling assets. They pay it off by issuing new bonds. They borrow new money to pay back old money, creating a perpetual cycle where the debt never decreases, only grows. This isn't financial mismanagement or temporary emergency measures. It's the explicit design of the modern monetary system. Government debt is meant to be permanent because government debt is the foundation asset of the entire banking system. Here's why this perpetual structure exists. In the modern economy, government bonds serve as the ultimate safe asset that backs everything else. Banks need safe collateral to satisfy regulatory capital requirements, so they hold government bonds. The central bank conducts monetary policy by buying and selling government bonds. Pension funds need safe long-term assets for retirees, so they hold government bonds. Even money market funds that claim to be like cash are actually backed by short-term government debt. If governments actually paid off their debt, this entire structure would collapse because there wouldn't be enough safe assets to back the banking system. The debt crisis narrative that treats government debt like household debt that must be repaid is deliberately misleading. The real crisis would be if government debt was eliminated, because that would destroy the asset base of the entire financial system. And here's the truly insidious mechanism. The government collects taxes from citizens to pay interest on this debt, transferring wealth from the public to the bondholders, who are predominantly wealthy institutions and individuals. You work, you pay taxes. A portion of those taxes go to interest payments on government bonds, and those interest payments flow to banks, pension funds, and wealthy investors who hold the bonds. It's a wealth extraction system disguised as government finance. The cost of living rises partly because government spending funded by ever-increasing debt creates inflation, wages stagnate, but the interest payments flow reliably to bondholders. And because the debt is never repaid, only rolled over, this extraction is permanent. The economic inequality isn't an unfortunate side effect, it's the mechanism. Debt that's never repaid creates permanent wealth flow from taxpayers to bondholders, from labor to capital, from the many to the financial elite few. But the most disturbing revelation is what this debt actually represents in the power structure. Let's examine the final truth that flips everything. Government debt isn't a problem to be solved. It's the asset that creates and maintains power in the modern economic system. When you understand that bonds are assets, not just liabilities, you see why powerful institutions want more government debt, not less. Every dollar of government debt is a dollar of safe, interest-bearing assets for the banking system to hold, to use as collateral for creating more loans, to trade in financial markets, and to satisfy regulatory requirements. The financial elite doesn't want government debt eliminated because eliminating that debt would eliminate their primary asset. This is why you see the apparent contradiction. Politicians campaign on reducing the debt while simultaneously voting for policies that increase it. Everyone understands the game debt must grow because debt is the asset base. This explains why monetary policy revolves around government debt. When central banks want to create money, they buy government bonds, injecting cash into the banking system. When they want to reduce money supply, they sell bonds. The bond market is where monetary policy happens, which means government debt is literally the control mechanism for the entire money system. And who benefits from this structure? The institutions closest to this process: major banks that trade bonds, primary dealers who are intermediaries between treasury and investors, and wealthy individuals who can access these markets directly. The wealth gap expands because those who hold government debt as assets profit from interest payments funded by everyone's taxes, while those who only pay taxes but don't hold bonds see their purchasing power decline through inflation caused by the debt-funded spending. And here's the final piece. The goal isn't debt elimination. The goal is maintaining debt credibility. As long as investors believe the government will make interest payments and the currency will hold some value, the debt can grow infinitely. The crisis comes not from debt size but from loss of confidence. This is why governments and central banks obsess over debt sustainability rather than debt elimination. They're managing perception, not actual repayment ability. The United States can run $38 trillion in debt because global investors still believe in dollar supremacy and treasury bond safety. Japan can run debt over 250% of GDP because domestic investors hold it and believe the government will maintain order. The crisis only comes when belief breaks, when bondholders lose faith that interest will be paid, or that currency will hold value. At that point, you get hyperinflation, currency collapse, and sovereign default. But until then, debt grows forever. Wealth concentrates among bondholders, and the financial elite maintain control through the asset of government debt itself. This system doesn't need reform. It needs complete reimagining, because the current structure is designed to transfer wealth perpetually from the many to the few through the mechanism of never-ending debt. So there's your answer to the paradox. Every nation is in debt, and that debt is held by domestic institutions, central banks, pension funds, and to a lesser extent foreign governments, all of whom treat that debt as an asset rather than a problem. The system is designed never to repay this debt, only to roll it over forever, because government bonds are the foundation asset of the modern banking system. And the real power lies not with foreign creditors, but with domestic financial elite who control both the debt issuance and the money creation process, extracting wealth from taxpayers through perpetual interest payments while maintaining control through the safe asset of government bonds. The question you need to answer is, if you now understand that government debt is perpetual wealth, transfer from taxpayers to bondholders, from labor to capital, from the many to the financial elite, what changes in how you view government spending, taxation, and the debt crisis narrative? Every tax dollar you pay partially funds interest on bonds held by wealthy institutions. Every increase in government debt creates more assets for bondholders while creating more future tax obligations for you. The debt isn't out of control. It's working exactly as designed. You're just on the wrong side of the transaction. Here's what I need you to do. Research who holds your country's government debt. Look at the breakdown between domestic institutions, central banks, and foreign holders. Then calculate how much of your tax payment goes to interest on that debt in the U.S. It's roughly 10-15% of the federal budget, and climbing. That money flows from your labor to bondholders' wealth. Sit with that injustice. And if this video solved the debt paradox and revealed that national debt is the mechanism of perpetual wealth extraction by the financial elite, subscribe to this channel right now, because understanding that debt is asset for the powerful, but burden for the rest, is the key to seeing how the entire economic system maintains inequality by design. The paradox isn't who holds the debt. The paradox is why we accept a system where our taxes fund interest payments on debt that's never meant to be repaid, enriching bondholders forever while we work harder for less. The answer, because we didn't understand how it worked. Now you do.